Funding for this video is brought to you in part by Book of the Month and from viewers like you. Thank you.
What's up, punks? And welcome to the video. Hi, my name is Allie. Around these parts, we balance daily life alongside disability, celebrate my identity, and read a whole lot of books. If you can't already tell by my out-of-breathness, stuffy nose, and overtly comfortable appearance, I am very sick. My microphone's not working. Everything that the gods could stack against us today are stacked. But we're still here. We're ready to fight, and by fight, I mean talk about books. I realized with this new every other week uploading schedule that we have not touched base. We have not sat down and simply chatted books in a little bit. So, today, we've got 26 books to discuss, everything that was devoured in July and August. It's gonna be great. It's raining, we've got a grout fit on. Nothing can stop us. Nothing! But before we dive headfirst into that, let's hear it from today's sponsor, a long friend of the channel, who is none other than Book of the Month. If you happen to be unfamiliar with them, Book of the Month is a monthly bookish subscription service that keeps you up to date on funky fresh reads and introduces you to authors, genres, and stories that you may not have otherwise found on your own, all while not having to leave the comfort of your home. Our reading experiences are consistently jacked up as their team is consistently vetting through hundreds of books to give us a monthly selection of both new and early release titles. And hey, maybe you prefer a weightless, immersive listening reading experience. That's great because they have audiobooks now. Sound the alarm! But my personal favorite part is their skip policy, because you can push pause on any month for any reason whatsoever without being questioned, charged, or penalized. I chose 2 books from their monthly selection. Let's talk about them! The first is Evil Eye by Etaf Rum, which is a contemporary fiction that explores the expectations placed on Palestinian American women, what it means to live a fulfilling life, and how unresolved paths can haunt our presence. I just love a realistic fiction that shows me a slice of life that isn't my own. The next I chose from their add-on list, and it is Bright Young Women by Jessica Knoll. Look at this cover. Look at both of these covers. Are you kidding me? This is a crime thriller mystery meets historical fiction. Like, it's based on true events. It's a story of 2 women who kind of form a found family of sorts under very unideal circumstances in order to find the truth. I just love when characters are able to find solace in wreckage, especially women. So if you would like to give either of these books a scoop or pick from their long selection each and every month of both hardcovers and audiobooks, feel free to click the link in the description box below and use the code AllisonPages to get your first book from Book of the Month for just $9.99. That is an unbeatable deal in my opinion. Thank you so much for sponsoring today's video. Book of the Month. Love working with y'all. Now let's continue talking about books. What's in this spooky dark corner? Anyway, 26 books, July and August. Summer was such a solid reading time for me. There were very few things that I didn't actively enjoy. There was only 1 book that I know for a fact I hated, but out of 26, only 1 book, can't complain, you know? We also span across so many different genres, so we're gonna break this down into 5 different categories. We got graphic novels / comics, translated stuff, because August was Women in Translation Month. We love to see it. A nice good old classic general fiction category, some non-fiction, and also because Summerween happened and we read so many spooky things, we've got a spooky category as well. Are you pumped? I am pumped. But first, you know how it goes. Our 3 quick disclaimers. 1, do not compare yourself to anyone in any walk of life, but especially when it comes to reading. As long as you're reading, you're winning. 2, if I loved a book that you hated or hated a book that you loved, that's not a personal attack. We all look for different things when we open up a story. Subjective feelings towards ink on paper are not taken personally in this house. And 3, please check any and all content warnings. If you have any sensitivities, there's no shame in that. Take care of yourself. Okay, let's kick this video off with our graphic novel / comic category, shall we? The first on the list is Junior High by Tegan and Sarah and Tillie Walden. It's a fictionalized version of true events based on the experiences of this musical twin duo. Tegan and Sarah started middle school in 1991, but this takes place in present day. Tillie Walden is one of my favorite graphic novel creators ever. I will read anything she writes without question, and this book did not let me down. It was so cute, it was so honest, so raw, so real, but also so wholesome and just true. You know, it captured the essence of starting middle school, all the anxieties, all the excitement, and like I said, it features real memories that these twins experienced together during this transition in their lives, the trials and tribulations of making new friends, and facing life's greatest prepubescent challenges. Just such a relatably clunky and cute time. The 3 of them just nailed this in my opinion. I loved it. Up next we have Through the Woods Stories by Emily Carroll. This is a spooky collection of short stories that are definitely on the more tame side, so if you're a big baby boy like me, you get scared very easily, you might be able to handle this. What I loved about this so much was that the cadence of each story felt like a story you would hear while you were sitting around a campfire bonfire. It was so reminiscent to me of being a little kid rushing home after the Scholastic Book Fair, knowing that you shouldn't read your scary stories to tell in the dark before bed, but doing so anyway. I thought that these were just cool as hell. Like, this was a creative collection of stories, and it left a lot to the imagination, which made it a little more eerie. A solid scoop for Halloween time, if I do say so myself, but also was so fun in the summer because of that bonfire camping feel. Up next is I Hate Fairyland by Scotty Young. I've been recommended this series for so long, and I am so excited to finally be in on the hype. I am always looking for more graphic novel and comic recommendations, so feel free to always share them with me. I have a video featuring all of my favorite comics and graphic novels, but that's about a year old now. We're due for a new episode, I do have to say. But so excited to have found these in the wild. This is a story about a little girl who makes a wish to be transported to a magical land, and she gets her wish, but the only caveat is that she never finds the key to leave said magical space. So now she's like 32 and trapped in the same 6-year-old body in this hellishly adorable space. So now she's rightfully angry, murderously bitter. She's got a bug companion who smokes cigars, has the cartoonish violence of Ren and Stimpy or Rick and Morty, with a very similar childlike but kind of spooky flavor of the Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy. This was hilarious, creative, colorful, and grim. Cannot wait to read the rest of the series. I'm so excited. I have 3 more. Next is Girl Juice by Benji Nate. Oh my goodness. This blew me out of the water. It follows the absolute hijinks and shenanigans of these 4 roommate friends. Each page is like a mini comic of these absolutely absurd yet relatably mundane happenings of these 20-somethings just trying to get by. I don't even know how to describe it, to be honest with you. It was just such a vibe. The protagonist sort of reminded me of Snot Girl by Brian Lee O'Malley, and the friendship and the silliness kind of reminded me of Giant Days, but at the same time, this truly cannot be compared to anything else. I think it is such a challenge for a book to be truly properly funny, and this was hilarious. I laughed out loud so many different times. I was stopping to read pages to Lawrence, I was taking pictures and sending it to friends. I cannot recommend this one enough. It's chaotic, it's nonsensical, it's horny, it's just straight up girly pop. You know when Gene Belcher sings girls being girls being girls being girls? That's what this is.
Go group! Shake 'em out!
I would love to know if you've read anything else by this creator and what your favorites are, because I need to get my hands on something else stat. The next book is technically a graphic novel, but we are technically dipping our toes into the translated category for Women in Translation Month. And that first book is Vergeet mij niet by Alex Garren, which means Forget Me Not in Dutch. Y'all, I am unwell after reading this book. Truly not okay. If you saw our last reading vlog, you know that I was ugly sobbing over this book. So this is the second book out of all of the books that I've ever read that have made me ugly sob. You probably already know the other one is Crying in H Mart. This story is about a granddaughter who breaks her grandmother out of her retirement home in order to help kickstart her memories, seeing as she is suffering from Alzheimer's. Now, Alzheimer's runs in my family, and also I am just such a sensitive sucker for being forced to imagine a world where my mom doesn't exist. And just something about childhood nostalgia and special memories and losing memories, like, it just hurts so bad, but it also hurts in a necessary way, I feel. Like, I needed to face these feelings. It was heartwarming, it was a little humorous, and it was overall just so beautiful. I have the Dutch language version, as you can tell, but the original version is French, but you can get the English version, which is called, like I said, Forget Me Not, and it's translated by Montana Kane. This is no questions asked a 5-star book for me. Up next on the translated list is Paradise Rot by Jenny Vall, which is a queer magical realism / horror novella that follows our protagonist who is looking for student housing while studying abroad. She befriends a very strange roommate, and even stranger things begin to unfold. Unfortunately, there was just something about this one that was so lost on me. I love gross books. I love books about girlhood. I love books about the grossness of girlhood. But there was just something missing here. However, when I read this one in a reading vlog and I said that I couldn't vibe with it, someone left me the most beautiful comment about how they wrote their entire thesis dissecting this book, and I just loved reading about what I personally missed. Also, it's important to note that I picked up this book because several people, like at least 20 people, told me to read this book. So it is pretty beloved, so I wouldn't take my word for it. Maybe it was a right book, wrong time kind of situation. I'm not entirely sure. It wasn't my thing, but it might be yours. And as always, thank you so much for sharing books that you think I would like, and most importantly, sharing your feelings, because I love hearing all of y'all's feelings, especially when it's different from my own, especially when it's done nicely. This one was translated from Norwegian to English by Miriam Idris. But a book that was definitely my thing was what we read for August in the Pocket Pages, which is the book club for this channel. It's $1 a month. I will link below how to join if you'd like. It's very fun. What we read in August was When I Sang Mountains Dance by Irene Sola, which is a story translated from Catalan by moshfegh. It's ultimately a generational story that takes place in the Pyrenees Mountains. At first pickup, I was so confused about what was happening, where we were going. It's just a very experimental, poetic way of writing, and each chapter is from a different perspective, and it's your job as a reader to find out whose perspective we're from, which at first, like I said, very hard, but you get into the swing of it, and then it is so satisfying. But overall, I didn't find it too challenging. I tend to struggle with big brain books. This is a medium brain book, I would say. It truly unfolded into this super rewarding puzzle. It was gorgeous. I got such a kick out of putting all the pieces together, seeing how everyone was connected. It's realistic yet magical. This was a damn impressive read. I am having so much fun reading all of your thoughts in the book club Discord server. I can't wait to share mine. I have so many tabs. I have so many favorite quotes to share with y'all. It's gonna be a great book club month. I also read My Brilliant Friend by Elena Ferrante. This is an Italian language story translated to English by Anne Goldstein. The main focus is on these two girls and their best friendship from childhood to adulthood, but it's more so, in my opinion, about the interminglings and daily dramas of this small town that they grew up in. This is such an iconic series that everyone seems to adore, so I am definitely an outlier in saying that I didn't drive with it personally. I just struggled to connect with this writing style. It was a lot of telling versus showing. I love to be shown things. I love to come to my own conclusions. I love marinating in scenes. I'm not the biggest fan of just being told how things are, but that's just me. I did love the girlhood and the female friendship featured in these pages. I thought it did such a great job at showing the undying love and commitment, but also the unavoidable competition that tends to blossom in these spaces. Personally, the first 80 pages or so were my favorite. I wish that we had spent more time in their younger years, so it wasn't my favorite. I'm not going to continue with this series, but I'm definitely happy to have read it and to know what everyone's been chatting about so much. Up next is The Memory Police by Yoko Ogawa, translated from Japanese by Stephen Snyder. This is about an island where a tyrannical government will randomly decide that very mundane objects are illegal, which then in turn alters people's memories. And when I say illegal, I mean that every item will be wiped from the island. So one day bells will be illegal, birds will be illegal, perfume is no longer allowed. This is such a creative idea, and I love Yoko Ogawa's other books, so I think I just need to give this author another shot, because the way that this story was executed simply did not work for me, which was so disappointing because, like I said, such a cool idea. I thought that the pacing left so much to be desired, and the ending left me pretty disappointed overall. I just needed way more answers, and I'm someone who loves to marinate in ambiguity. I love not having all of my questions come to a conclusion, but to me this one just had an unfinished feeling as opposed to a purposefully ambiguous feeling. What I did really like about it, aside from the super unique concept, was that it had similar themes to that which you could see in We Spread by Ian Reid. I love themes about memory and how powerful memory is, but also how powerful it is to forget things. Such a cool idea. And the last book from our Women in Translation list is The Employees by Olga Ravin, which is translated from Danish to English by Marvin Aitken. This is another super experimental poetic novella, and we're given these little snippets from these interviews from this group of humans and humanoids that work in this factory, company, space thing. To me, this was creatively ambiguous. It critiques capitalism, it explores what it means to be a person. Two things I love so much in my stories. I just thought that this one had some seriously powerful beats. I was so impressed with this. Very intimidated from the beginning. Didn't think I was gonna like it. Was so afraid that my brain was too small, but then I felt so smart. I just caught myself feeling so understood by the humanoids, and I thought that the metaphors and themes surrounding otherness were so relatable. We also dip our toes into ethics and morality and connection. Just so much in so little time. This book packed such a punch. The writing was breathtaking, the execution was unique, and just so well done. This one did it for me. I really liked it. Up next, we have 4 books that just fall into the general fiction category. We've got 2 contemporary literary type fictions, 1 YA/middle grade question mark, and also a children's chapter book. Let's start with the children's chapter book. I read The Tale of Despero by Kate DiCamillo, and this is such a sweet story intended for a younger audience, published in the early 2000s. I would say it's a classic at this point. It's about this little mouse who falls in love with a princess, and I don't even know what to say. It was just so cute. It's definitely on the cozier end of things. Like if I were to make a cozy fantasy, cozy sci-fi, cozy etc. shelf, this would definitely fall onto it. Talking animals always gets me personally. I love the themes about darkness and lightness and how you can find the light by sharing your story. Like, so cute. There was just so many stellar life lessons in this. It was so readable. There's pictures in there. I couldn't recommend this one enough. I also read A Kind of Spark by Elle McNichol, which is a middle grade/YA short chapter book. This story follows a young protagonist who is autistic as she grows up in her small Scottish town, and she discovers that where she's from is responsible for a lot of witch trials. And she draws these powerful and painful parallels between those who were considered witches back in the day and modern day disabled folks. This story was so cute and so necessary to me. I could feel it healing both my inner child, but also just present day, full grown ass adult Allie now. This was just a hug in book form to me. I loved the sisterhood that was featured in these pages. I'm such a sucker for that. It was strong, it was sweet. This book was just really good. It was really, really good. 3 cheers for neurodivergence. Y'all, I finally read it. I finally read My Year of Rest and Relaxation by Ottessa Moshfegh. I know. On one hand, took you long enough. On the other hand, what do you mean you read another Ottessa Moshfegh? You read Eileen in 2020 and hated it and swore off this author. I know. Everyone's been freaking out about this book over the past few years. All the hot girls are reading it. I want to be a hot girl too. But also, most importantly, a lot of my friends whose opinions I respect and adore said that Eileen, we don't talk about her. This book slaps. So I was like, okay, fine, I'll give it a chance. I was completely convinced I would hate it. I've had it on my TBR shelf for like a year. I thought maybe there would never be a day that I would open this book. But y'all, this was a vibe. I liked this one a lot. It follows a young woman who just hits an absolute wall of grief. A bunch of horrible things unfold and she shuts down and decides, I am going to just sleep for an entire year. I'm gonna give myself a year. I'm gonna take a bunch of prescription medications and just do the bare minimum of using the bathroom and eating food. But for the most part, I will be sleeping, I will be resting, I will be rotting. There was something about the way that this was written that I just fell right into. I was always excited to pick it up. Not that it was page turny, like what's gonna happen next. It was just a sauce that I liked to marinate in. I liked it so much and I couldn't tell you why. I do get why a lot of people don't like it. Our protagonist is very wealthy. She's very privileged. She's not nice. I think you're allowed to not like this book. What I do take issue with though is people who think that this book should be sworn off because our protagonist is not the best version of herself. Why are we consistently shouting from the rooftops about mental health acceptance and awareness, but then the second that someone shows the unsavory side effects of suffering from mental illness, suddenly, no, that's not what we're talking about. We're only talking about the quirky traits. We're not talking about being a bad friend or saying the wrong things or being unintentionally selfish, etc. No. We're talking about other cute, relatable things. Like, would I seek out and actively try to be this person's friend? No. But do I need to smite this story and yeet all my advocacy out the window just because it features somebody living in the absolute trenches mentally after facing some serious trauma, swimming in grief so deep that they are not a good version of themselves? I personally don't think so, but I guess that's just me. The ending was very silly, in my opinion. I called it. I didn't want it to be so, but it was so. I don't know why that was thrown in there, but I mean, hey, I still loved the writing. Does this change my opinion on Eileen? No. Am I gonna pick up Lapvona? No. But I very much liked this one. I was not expecting to at all. I'm just as shocked as you. Speaking of shocked, the next book I thought I would love, but actually really didn't like. I'm So Sorry, Part 2. I'm talking about All's Well by Mona Awad. I loved Bunny so much by this author, and I thought that I would love this one even more because it features our protagonist who's suffering from chronic pain. And said protagonist is a theater teacher professor and they're putting on a play. And there was some seriously beautiful writing here, but I just didn't care about anything. I just couldn't care about this story for some reason. She wants to put on this play, but all the kids want to put on this play, and so they're gonna fight about it, but then they're gonna end up putting on this play. I was even a theater kid, and I just didn't care. I wanted to so badly, but I couldn't. There's a few pages in here where we get her inner dialogue as she watches a pain medication commercial, and I loved that so much I almost cried. That I will pocket and keep with me till the end of my days. But aside from those few pages, this one didn't work for me at all, and I'm so shocked by that. At the end of the day, it just kind of felt like it was trying to accomplish so many different things, and half of those things were unclear and the other half of them were so far apart and removed from one another that the story was just spread so thin. And like I said, I love confusing and ambiguous and eerie, but this just didn't have the purpose to make that bewilderment productive, in my opinion. I get why so many folks love it. I hear that the Mona Awad fans are very split. They either like All's Well or they like Bunny, and I thought I would be on this team, but shockingly enough, I'm on this team. Still happy to have read it. Still one of the most gorgeous covers to ever grace this green earth. It just wasn't for me. Up next, we have 3 nonfictions, and just look at all of these tabs. It was a good nonfiction summer. We read a nonfiction together for the Pocket Pages book club, the book club for this channel. In July, we read The Book of Delights by Ross Gay, which was such a simple and straightforward project that our author embarked on for a year. He decided that from one birthday to the next, he would write daily, focusing on delight and happiness and gratitude. But at the same time, he learns along the way that it is also the darker sides and experiences of life that allow the delight to to shine even brighter. So we get these little snapshots of sweet moments and feelings and memories that are so heartwarming, not too fluffy, if that makes sense. Like, we keep our feet in reality. We're talking about real issues as well, but the thesis remains that we need both sides of the coin to thrive, which I love. But I also love stories that remind me how small and insignificant I am, non-derogatory, and prompts me to zoom out and recognize how many little wonderful things are taking place amongst the chaos each and every day. Just one of those books that made me feel less alone about being a human. It definitely could have been tighter, perhaps it could have been edited in one way or another, but then again, that raw journal entry flavor is what made it what it is. So not only happy to have read it, but so happy that we read it together. Thank you for sharing your feelings with me. Oh yeah, there's more than 3, because I read one book on Kindle, and it's the Pain Management Workbook, which is an informative guide about pain / workbook featuring activities to manage your pain. I am so conflicted about how to feel about this one, y'all. I got this book because I listened to this author who is a guest star on Ologies, and I loved hearing about her passion. She is a specialist in chronic pain. She suffers from chronic pain herself. I really have only 2 problems with this book, so to say, kind of 2.5. 1.5 is that it is CBT, which is not my rap, and it is very beginner at times. So a lot of these things I have heard ad nauseum before, which is no fault of the book itself. It's just why it didn't stand out as hard as it could have for me. But if you are a beginner, this could be a great place to start. The second is that a lot of this advice isn't applicable to hemiplegic migraines, which are the migraines that I suffer from, which is just one flavor of the hundreds of flavors of migraines and chronic pain that exist out there. So it might not be the most applicable to your situation either. A lot of it is based around doing more in order to do more. So you really gotta tailor this book to your personal experience. You have to be very aware of your limits and your boundaries, which was a little confusing seeing how beginner this felt. It also felt like you needed to be at a very high level in understanding your pain at the same time. But if you are able to do that, I think that this book could be really helpful, because I left it feeling very 50-50. I was like, okay, there's some great stuff in this, there's some not so great stuff in this. It's like any self-help book, you know? But then I was scheduled to go to a concert out of the country, and I had a sleepless night the evening before we needed to catch a train. That sleepless night resulted in a migraine. Luckily for me, it was on the less debilitating end of things, but it was a migraine nonetheless. Had it been worse, I wouldn't have gone. And it was hell to get there, but I'm so grateful that I did it. Again, I needed to be very aware of my boundaries and my limits, because there are so many days where I could not have pushed myself like that. I still pulled up to the function with half of my face paralyzed, melted. One of my eyes were almost closed. I spent half of the trip in a dark room by myself, but I still got to laugh with my friends and dance to music that we all love. And I simply would not have tried going if it weren't for this book. So in that sense, I am very grateful for it. And I have to give it credit. I do. So I think at the end of the day, you truly just have to treat this like any other self-help book, okay? 1, you may not agree with everything, and that is okay. 2, it may be frustrating at times. 3, and this is the most important, not everything is going to apply to your specific life and its specific circumstances, because nothing on this planet ever will. So 4, read up, pocket what you can, do what you can, and just remember there's no test afterwards. That was a very long explanation, but hey, it had to be done. Let's talk about Page Boy by Elliot Page. I've had this one pre-ordered since like January. This is Elliot Page's memoir that features his experiences working in Hollywood during his most transformative years, being closeted, kissing co-stars, and finding confidence in himself and his identity. I think that this is such an important memoir that features trans joy and self-acceptance. It was pretty readable, and I found Elliot Page to be a pretty talented writer. There were some seriously touching lines in this one. I do agree with folks that say that the structure of this book may have weakened the overall reading experience. It is more of a non-linear collection of essays than it is a cohesive memoir, in my opinion. And that has its strengths and its weaknesses, depending on how you like to read your non-fiction-y memoir type stories. For me, I wish that we had just dug a little deeper at times and had some more clear scenes and moments as opposed to being told most everything. But aside from some of the structural choices, I overall appreciated and enjoyed this read. I loved hearing about what happened behind the scenes for Juno, for example, and his feelings surrounding each of these milestones that he hit. And also I can just value how f***ing difficult it must have been to have to relive and write about all of the homophobia and transphobia Elliot faced while living his life in such a spotlight. So happy to have read this one. Another book I'm so happy to have read was Strong Female Character by Fern Brady. This is a memoir I read this summer that Fern wrote about herself. That's what a memoir is. I don't need to explain this to you. Fern was an autistic girl but didn't know until she was an autistic woman, much like myself. So perhaps I'm horrendously biased, I gotta be honest. But this is one of my favorite books that I've read this year, hands down. The complications and self-questioning that she endured during her formative years just made this such an effortless story to connect to. Especially the anger. The anger is what really got me. She works in strip clubs, she experiences homelessness, endures tumultuous relationships, and all while being misdiagnosed, mismedicated, etc. And she's pissed. and she is rightfully pissed. I felt the rage. I've been there, and I just was so thankful to see that featured. I adore reading stories and memoirs, etc. about autistic folks who knew that they were autistic at a young age, and so now they have a seemingly endless arsenal of resources and self-understanding under their belts. They've had accommodation in school, an understanding support system that got them help when they were young and all that jazz. That's amazing. I have so much to learn from them. I value those stories, but I do not relate to those stories at all. That is just not my experience. This one is closer to it. It just shows the risks of being a highly masked autistic girl in the wild, essentially. I also learned a lot while reading it, despite having read several books on this topic. This is the book that taught me what cognitive overstimulation was, which is what we talked about in the last vlog. I just appreciate Fern's vulnerability so much. I loved this memoir so much. More than she could ever know, this sits at the tippy top of the list of my favorite books featuring autistic people. But again, like I said, maybe I'm a little biased. Okay, y'all. This is how many spooky books we have to talk about, because not only did we do a 24-hour readathon reading challenge vlog for Summerween, but I also read one for fun. So let's talk about the one for fun first. And that is A Flicker in the Dark by Stacey Willingham. I read this one towards the end of August when I wasn't necessarily in a reading slump, but I definitely didn't want to use my brain to read. So I just wanted a page-turnery thriller so I could still enjoy a book but not overwork my gray matter. And this fit the bill. I read this in a day without even trying, and I guessed the plot twists, and I still had a good time. I'm getting way ahead of myself. This is about a woman whose dad was convicted for being a serial killer when she was 12, and now we are faced with the 20-year anniversary of this horrible day, and all of these copycat type murders seem to be sprouting up around the town. It raises a lot of suspicions, it unearths a bunch of trauma, and I was just hooked from start to finish. This is definitely more on the side of a whodunit detective picking up the clues type flavor of thriller, which usually isn't even my favorite flavor of thriller, and again, still had a good time. And that sort of sets the scene for the rest of the books that we're going to be talking about to end off this video, because I'm typically pretty easy to please when it comes to thrillers and spooky books. Very easy to scare. As long as I'm entertained, I'm having a good time. So, real fast, we're going to discuss everything that we read for Summerween, but extra rapid fire because we already have a whole hour-long video. The first is Hidden Pictures by Jason Rekulik. Way too many conservative dog whistles in this one for me. Personally, I like to be scared by ghosts and murderers, etc., and not from not even subtle political inserts. Watch Beautifully Bookish Bethany's video. I will link it down below if you have any more questions. I already feel like this book was just given way too much screen time. It was a big nope for me. Next, The Only One Left by Riley Sager. This is Sager's newest release, and it's about a woman who is a caretaker, and she gets this new job of watching this little old lady who allegedly killed her whole family way back when. She cannot speak and has limited movement, so she starts to tell this protagonist caretaker the truth by slowly typing her spooky story on a typewriter. Now, this book gave me more so soap opera vibes than it did thriller vibes. I was very bored by the first half, and the second half was so absurd that I was pretty entertained, I'm not gonna lie. It was so ridiculous, but it was also just such a romp. Like, if I had to give it a numerical rating, it's probably like a 2.5, but I still had so much fun. Like, I'm sorry, I'm just gonna keep reading Riley Sager. Like, even when I'm not having a good time, I'm having a good time. I don't understand it. I had fun, despite the absurdity. Next is These Silent Woods by Kimmy Cunningham Grant. First things first, this book is not a thriller. This is a suspense, family drama type situation. It follows a father who apparently did something so terribly, unforgivably wrong, and so he took his daughter, and they're living in the wilderness, and the only man who knows that they're there and provides rations for them one winter just doesn't show up. So they're forced with having to decide between two very unsavory choices: waste away for the winter or risk being recognized and go get the rations themselves. I gotta be honest, I thought that this one was pretty boring, but I think a lot of the disappointment lies in the fact that this book was so wrongfully advertised and categorized online. It says it's a horror/thriller. I would say that it's neither of those things, and not in a ooh, I wasn't thrilled, ooh, I wasn't scared kind of way. It just doesn't feature the necessary components to be those genres, which is fine. It's fine that it is what it is. I just wouldn't have picked it up had I known that it was what it was. So I wouldn't recommend it. It wasn't my thing, but also it has like a 4.1 on Goodreads, so don't take my word for it. But if you do want to talk about a book I would recommend, let's talk about The Girl with All the Gifts by M.R. Carey. Oh my god, this is a zombie book, but it is so much more than a zombie book. We open with this group of kids who are in this underground military base type place, and they're all strapped to these chairs, and they're wheeled every day to class, to their meals, to the sanitation rooms, and you have no idea what's going on, but you are intrigued immediately. So much goes down. I don't even know what I can tell you. Just know that it transcends the genre and presents all of these profound themes that are not necessary in books like these, in my opinion. You know, like I said, am I entertained? Am I a little unsettled? Great. But there were lessons, there were themes, tasty, tasty themes. So not only is it a page turner, but it's thought-provoking, the characters are so succinct. Overall, it did not feel like the length that it is. This is a book that made me forget about my phone. This book was so good. The ending? I have chills just thinking about it. Ooh, so good, so good, so good. More than good, actually. It's also fungal horror, otherwise known as sporror, if that's your jam. I also read What Moves the Dead by T. Kingfisher. This was baby's first T. Kingfisher, and I was told by many of you that I might have started in the wrong place. That's okay. This is also a sporror, and it's also a retelling of an Edgar Allan Poe book. We follow a man who's visiting a childhood best friend who is very ill, but the sickness that she has is suspicious. Now it's a novella, but this book felt so long to me. The pacing was a bit odd, and the characters were so flat. Like, there was so much potential with having this childhood best friendship, but I just didn't feel any connection whatsoever. The spooky parts were spooky though, I'm not gonna lie. There is a scene towards the end involving a neck that I wish I could unsee, but she is seared into my brain. So I am very curious about T. Kingfisher's other works. Don't worry, I'm not giving up on the author. I have These Hollow Places to give her longer horror a shot, and also The Wizard's Guide to Defensive Baking to give her cozy fantasy a shot. So do not worry. Let me know what your favorite T. Kingfisher is, because this is not the end for us. I also read the last Ian Reid book that I have yet to read. I read his whole discography now, which is so exciting. This is Foe, and it is a sci-fi horror hybrid about this couple that live in the middle of nowhere, and one day this man arrives and offers them something that they can't refuse. Literally, they can't refuse it. That's all I can say, really. Don't read the blurb is another thing I would say, because it spoils everything. Just know that it's Ian Reid, so it's eerie and it's puzzling, and nobody's acting like how people act, and you're trying to figure out why. This is his first book, and I would have to say that it's my least favorite of the three. However, that is so exciting to me because the favorites grow stronger the newer the books get. So he's just getting better and better at his craft, which is so cool to see. But it was also really cool to see some of his themes that he fleshes out even further in his newer books be introduced, like he's dipping his toes into them here. It was pretty neat. And also there is a movie adaptation coming out of this, and I'm so excited. And last but not least is Tin Foil Butterfly by Rachel Eve Moulton. This is a super unsettling horror story about this woman who seems to be fleeing something from her past, and while on the road she runs into this boy who has a tinfoil mask on, and he seems to be her only help for miles, so she follows him home. I can't tell you anything else except for that, but I don't think you need to know anything else. Usually the scariest horrors are the ones that you have no idea what you're in for. This book had me looking through my fingers like I was watching a movie in order to read it. But also, these characters had some of the sweetest bonds I'd ever seen. Like, these were some of my favorite character connections. It's a book that respects your time, so extra points there, and packs such a punch while doing so. It was terrifying, but lovely, but unsettling, but sweet, but gross, but also had themes that absolutely slapped. Like, sure, let's explore ethics and morality while nauseating me to my bones. Sure, throw it all into the cart. This is a top tier horror to me. Like, anytime someone asks for a horror recommendation, this is the direction that I will be sending them. Ooh, this was so good. 5 stars. And there you have it. Those are the 26 things that I read in the months of July and August. I love reading with y'all. I can't wait to read the new Catherine Lacey together in September, which I suppose effortlessly segues us into my thank you to everyone who is on the Patreon. You are the ones who make this what it is. You are the ones that make it so I am employed despite having the plague. So grateful. I love what we do here. I love this cozy corner of the internet. Thank you so much for keeping it alive. And of course, an extra special thank you to Book of the Month for sponsoring today's video as well. Friendly reminder, you can get your first hardcover book or audiobook, y'all, for just $9.99 using the code AllisonPages at checkout and clicking the link in the description box below. I think that's everything. We covered all the business. Thank you so much for sitting and chatting with me today. We upload every other week now because we are taking care of ourselves. And that is that. Thank you for clicking, thank you for caring, and thank you for being nice. I'll see you in the next one. Bye!